Yeah, so for the kits, I was kind of comparing it to quantiferin gold because like ThinPrep is just one brand that's used in the US. I don't know if they're global market, if they're in Norway too, but they may or may not be. But oftentimes these methods, when they're adopted by laboratories, they're clinically validated where you have a specimen collection kit. So typically it might be their particular brush. They have pre-filled containers with the liquid preservative. So kind of like we've been talking about some of the O&O calls in HL7. Um, they're kind of from the vendor that way typically. They're used in the clinician's office to collect the specimens sent to the laboratory. And then from what I recall in the labs that I was in, which is some time ago too, so there's some things that may have changed, but they have the instrumentation that's designs for use with those particular samples. And it kind of does like some of the urinalysis too that we have where there's like kind of, I think, a flow of the fluid so they can see the cells digitally on the screen. And then, if they're detecting things or not. I think there's still the capability to do slides if they need to. But again, I'm just going off my memory, so I would have to do some more research, like I said in the email, to kind of look at the deeper dive of the methods and what's approved and used. Now, if it's something, and the other thing is a lot of protocols in the US, because of HPV, they typically have with the order that they reflex automatically to the HPV testing, just to make sure that the patient doesn't have a high risk um, marker for that. If needed, they could potentially just do the HPV testing separately, but typically it's kind of all in one because to avoid further patient harm with the collection of the specimens. Um, and the other thing too, I didn't know if Nancy was on. It looks like
She's
she might
not
be.
on this week.
So they also, when you're doing reflex testing for for isolates or other things, since that's only specimens collected, from vaginal, cervical, I should probably say cervical, then that's typically what is going to be used for the HPV testing. Because again, the cells would be in that liquid versus, whether it was just a scraping on the brush or on the brush itself. And so typically they call it cytopathology, but I know a lot of people use cytology because the shortened version. It's easier to say.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think Hannah's question definitely revolved around the codification for specimen collection and how that workflow is going. The procedures didn't seem to be as much of an issue, or the reflex testing, um, but it seemed to be more around standardization of the specimen collection process.
Yeah, but does it really matter? I mean, it's the container that they're collecting it into, and they are collecting cells
Hmm.
Right.
that are being tested, even if it's PCR based. So I
Yeah.
don't I see the problem that the procedure is called liquid-based cytology a problem, but is that really the specimen collection, or should that be an observable entity, right? Where
Yeah.
the specimen collection procedure is actually the cervical swab, right? And then the
Hmm.
container is the liquid thing, the
Hmm.
container with the special liquid, the thin prep, and the test that is being performed is, whatever detection they do. I think a lot of them do PCR.
And I could be misunderstanding the request from Norway.
Well, I think a
So,
lot of people still use procedure hierarchy for lab tests too. So,
mhm.
right, which is
Well,
a
it's mostly
problem.
well, especially in other countries. I mean,
Yeah.
if I mean, I mean, I know like the UK and Australia would, right, for their orders for lab tests, and that's fine.
Right.
You can
Yeah.
do that. Um, I put in the chat to the thin prep, and I mean, right on the bottom of their page, they say, they're the only pap test FDA approved and cleared for HPV, chlamydia, gonorrhea, and trichomonas out of the same vial.
Hmm.
So it's kind of partially down in the white section down the page, right there on women's health testing.
Sorry. Yeah. I
So
just have to click on it in
yeah,
order
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
get
No, I
the
know, I know.
link.
It's
So,
in chat. Um, and so they're like, and then the middle figure on our ancillary testing, they're also advertising they have 3 times more pre-cytology volume for ancillary testing compared to SurePath. Because I mean, the other thing too is if they have, I don't know if they keep the original brush and sample for there for the HPV, or if they're actually like for the traditional slide-based approach, taking a sample from the slide of cells, where they either are swabbing it, and generally if you're swabbing something to get the cells off the swab, you're putting it in a liquid and kind of swishing it around so the cells fall off the swab into the container that you're using for testing. I mean, that's where I need to kind of go do some more digging on stuff. So that part of it, I mean, it could be too that, if you have vaginal fluid or cervical fluid on a swab, if you're directly sampling that from a patient, wherever the testing, because HPV can be in multiple areas and, different types of genital swabs, male, female, then it would be on the swab to, for testing. But typically there's a lot of swabs you'll try to get the cells and the fluid off the swab when you do the testing process. But I have to look them up for, how the HPVs are done. So that's not really going to be any different whether it's directly in the liquid at the point of collection versus downstream processing workflows.
yeah. So, but Kathy, are you going to be around July 2nd? And maybe you said you guys are doing the HPV testing.
We do HPV testing, PAP testing
Yeah.
and HPV, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Um,
y'all gotten into areas I started having to try and look things up because I mean HPV often goes with the PAP testing. Those are often done together.
right.
But y'all are talking about other kind of HPV, and yeah, I realize there is other kinds, but I'm not sure what we do there.
Well, I think she is worried about the testing done off the sample submitted in this container, right?
I just grabbed one in the
And
chat. It's
using the and using I think this comes with a swab and stuff too that belongs to it,
There
I
are
think.
different ways to do the corrections. There's a brush, there's a
right.
swab, there's another one. I know I'm missing one.
Right.
Um, and I think some of them you actually clip it off and drop it down in the tube.
Yeah, so I just grabbed one of yours from LabCore that says that, and it talks about the collection instructions. So it has the brush spatula technique, the SurePath vial, which is
Spatula.
another vendor that has their cyto-rich preservative in the vial, um, and then thin prep 2 vial. If you go down to the specimen collection details.
Even think some people are moving now to just testing for HPV and not for PAP, unless HPV
Hmm.
is positive and then they test.
Right. That's what it sounds like Norway is doing.
This is kind of what Kathy was describing from their compendium.
Hmm. Yeah.
And this is for the high risk HPV for the genotypes 16 and 18. And I'll just say there's so many different combinations of the genotypes. So, and then because there's just quite a few link codes for those, if you see
Right.
too.
But so what's our question then? I guess I'm lost in all the different things
So
we've talked.
the question for her is that she is wondering um, if the procedure in SNOMED should be called a liquid-based cytology, even though it's not necessarily analyzed for cytology sometimes. So, but it sounds like they're using procedure hierarchies to order their lab tests.
Oh, I see.
And
We are
so
not.
that's, yeah,
We put the SNOMED in when we have to report it. Most of our things we don't put a SNOMED for until it has to be reported.
right,
Yeah, we don't use
right. And
SNOMED
and
procedure
but we're
hierarchy,
using LOINC here to identify the test, right?
right? Not
Hmm.
SNOMED. Like
So,
they
But
and
if it
and they
has to
might
be
be
state
using SNOMED
reported,
instead.
it gets, well, okay. But if we have
Yeah,
to state report something,
right,
if there's a SNOMED, it has to be there.
right. Yeah.
Well, so the difference is this is on the ordering side, Kathy, from the sense, and we don't use that in the US. SNOMED is not required for the order for the
Correct.
test. It's
We do
like,
not use SNOMED for
yeah.
ordering.
But
Mhm.
Norway does, and that's why her question is arising because she's trying to figure out which SNOMED
Okay.
code and is it appropriate the way it is for cytology.
Yeah, okay, so I won't find that answer in my stuff.
No, but we could tell her, I mean, we're using LOINC, but to me, what there's different aspects, right? Is she talking about ordering the specimen collection procedure into this specific vial, or is she ordering the test? And we would, yeah. I mean, I think it'd be good, to get a little bit more detail from her specifically about it. I was wondering if we should try to reach out to other folks, maybe from Arup and Quest also to get their perspective, or and invite them specifically for the July 2nd call to discuss that.
You could see if Jenna might be available. I think she would be a good resource, but I you know it I think that there's a couple things. So, folks in the US may not be familiar with the SNOMED procedure hierarchy for ordering, since we don't use that in the US. And it's done in other countries. I don't see that she says anything about the specimen aspects um, related to collection. Although she says the procedure to obtain cell samples is the same for both HPV and the cytology test. Well, that's true because they're
Right.
collected with the same single specimen. So you would use the same procedure unless you're doing a separate HPV swab and then doing like a brush for the cervical specimen.
Yeah,
But
I'm
typically,
just not entirely sure what exactly she's talking about when she says calling a procedure the liquid-based cytology, right? If this is if this is what she
yeah, that's what I'm
is
trying to
asking
explain.
for the order test, then yes, I can see her problem if, you know, if, yeah. So anyway, I think I'll see if we can get Jenna to join. Nancy will be back. I asked if there are any epidemiologists that might have a thought on this. So I haven't gotten that answer back yet.
Yeah, so
But
Ricky, what I was trying
Yeah,
to
when you
explain is to answer that
said,
question in that the procedure won't necessarily be analyzed for cytology. She's kind of indicating, that
right,
cytology, she's seeing it as the reading of cells on a slide,
right.
and or in the liquid digital system. And since you're not really looking at the cells, for the HPV, you're actually having a PCR biomarker against what's in the specimen on the cells.
Mhm.
Yeah, she's technically correct. Those are two different things because you're not going to
sure.
see the HPV, through a digital or manual microscopy method. She's absolutely correct in that way.
She would
Right.
Um,
need two separate SNOMEDs for the order. She could have the same specimen, but she'd need two separate SNOMEDs if she's using them to order two separate things.
that's true too. That's where I got into the reflex because
Right.
If it's something like the pap smear and HPV, then, what you just said, Kathy, is absolutely correct. You could have a combined term for the order, although I don't know if the procedure hierarchy is set up that way. Or you'd have to just have them separate.
Yeah, but there's the whole other discussion whether procedure hierarchy is even the right spot for this, right? Whether these shouldn't be observable entities, but so
Yeah. Yeah, there's that.
Hmm.
Just the
so
term in the hierarchy, right?
it's a different hierarchy.
No, I said there's the
Observable.
terms and then there's the hierarchy, like
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
belong.
Yeah. Yeah. So so anyway, I'll see if we can set this discussion up for July 2nd. If not, she said July 23rd. I won't be here, but I don't have much input necessarily
Hmm.
on this. So, Christina, are you around on the 23rd of July?
Yes, I should be.
Okay, so we could also, so I'll offer both dates up to see if Jenna is either available on either of those dates. Um, and then go from there. Okay. Then the serologic, oh, Andrea's out on July 23rd also.
Yeah, not that week.
Yeah. So I'll say that the preferred day would be next week if we can manage to do it.
Or at
Yeah.
least we could bump it out later. Like,
Uh,
Yeah, we might be able to bump it beyond, but those were just the two most immediate dates.
Well, if she can do it next week, that would be good. We get it out of the way.
right. Yeah. Um, agreed. So that's why I'm gonna focus on getting to that. Um, so the serologic question, do you want to talk through that? I pulled up the
Sure.
PDF. Where do you want me to go? Just to the
Um,
proposed solution or?
I guess yeah. We can so basically, yeah, let's go down to the proposed solution. So basically there's a series of clinical findings in SNOMED that designate whether something was done by serology or by a serologic test. And the proposal is to remove the word serology from the fully specified name, um, and thereby make them uh, more generic. And more usable because they aren't always tied to specifically to a serologic test. So the first one is looking specifically at the immunity to X organisms, where we would be removing the determined by serology, and that would be replaced with a determined by antibody measurement.
Yeah, I mean that to me is good. I'm not so fond of the hepatitis A virus immune, but that's maybe just me. But
As far as do you have a proposal for a different
I like
PQ?
immunity
yeah,
to X organism better than organism name immune, but
Okay.
yeah, the patient's immune, but if you're measuring something, it's immunity that you're measuring
yeah.
based on the antibody.
Or hepatitis
Okay.
A virus immune status.
Well, it's not qualitative, like yes or no immune. It'd be more like a quantitative. So if you have like, I don't know what the
No, this is
guys
a
typically use.
well, um,
Unless you're just looking for qualitative only, then yeah, you could do status. But
I mean
antibodies
this
can be
is
done
an
roughly.
answer. This is an answer code. Okay. So they're
Mm,
saying this person is
oh,
immune
No,
as
correct.
no, it's
determined
no,
by
it's well,
antibody
no.
measurement.
So the testing,
Yes, so
usually
status
you
doesn't
have
work.
your procedure observable. I think most of them are going to be observables, and then the answer would be positive or negative and from the qualifier hierarchy. So you wouldn't use the finding code. That would be
Mm,
more of the
Mm,
diagnosis used by the clinician in the EHR.
right, but they need that.
okay.
Yeah, I mean they would need that to say, um, to as an answer to the immune status. So I guess maybe it's okay. But I like determined by antibody measurement instead of serology. So I have no problem with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
for public, I guess my question for public health though, is that going to be an issue? Because typically they want to know like the methodology because it has different sensitivity and specificity. And for clinicians, I know that was something that came up for COVID, that Dr. Lee brought up several times too. So um, I don't have a problem with having a generic one like this, but is there also a need to know if it's by serology specifically, or does that not matter to anybody clinically?
Well, this isn't an isolated piece of clinical information. So if they need to know the method, they can go back to the laboratory panel from and determine, what was the link code, what was the method, what was the result value or the titer value. This is just the problem list entry for the clinical findings saying that the person was a
Right.
hepatitis A virus immune. So I think by putting more information in this concept is not appropriate. It's overloading what this concept's meant to do.
I guess the
That's
question
fine.
is, does this serology mean that they were looking for antibodies, or does this serology mean they use serological methods?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
And the other part of it too is for clinicians doing clinical protocols. Um, I don't know the answer. This is where Nancy would be good on this. From the sense of if you need to know that they did it by certain methods, that sort of thing. Um, because kind of like the difference between some of the discussions we've been having, like between screening tests and confirmatory. Screening is good, but it doesn't confirm things, and with the sensitivity and specificity again. Um, so that's why I'm just kind of curious if that is a factor. I'm okay, like I said, I'm okay with the generic one as long as there isn't a need for the specific one.
So would it be better in this particular case just to say immunity to organism X and stop there and get rid of the determine how it was determined? Since this is technically not a response value to a qualitative laboratory test, this is more of a problemless diagnosis. Although I don't know that that's appropriate either because these fall under the measurement findings hierarchy. Let me just take a quick look here.
Yeah, if you want to share your screen, you're welcome to also.
Yeah, and I'd say like from a clinical kind of parallel, since we're just talking about pap smears, it may be that a patient had um, an abnormal pap smear, let's say. It doesn't mean they have cancer. And that's kind of the distinction. You need to have further testing. And so you can't diagnose and put a problem the patient has cancer based on that pap smear. Same thing for like a biopsy. Some can kind of like preliminary, I don't want to say preliminary findings because that has a different context, but it's a methodology that's done that isn't necessarily definitive diagnostic. It's more screening. And so in some cases, it's really important to know if something is diagnostic or not. So if you're hanging your diagnosis on that from a decision making,
Mhm.
does that make sense? Or like doing a Cologuard. Okay,
Yeah.
you're looking for, I know it's a little bit different test, but it doesn't mean
Mhm.
that you're definitive for colorectal cancer because you don't have staging information. You just have this kind of positive marker if you have a positive Cologuard. That's why you have to get the diagnostic colonoscopy done.
Right.
So that's where these kind of differences in the tests on what they're detecting or doing in the methods are important.
Okay, so let's take a quick look. Ricky, could you put the link to the actual BN into the briefing note into the chat for me?
Sure. Hang on.
And then let
Uh,
me share.
oh, did I? Hang on.
And what I
Did
don't know
I?
is what level of detail the clinician has to put in their problem list from a medical legal perspective, or
Mhm.
if that diagnosis or finding is used as justification for ordering the
I
confirmatory
don't,
method.
I don't know that I have that
Well,
link
the
you said
oh, oh,
you
okay,
shared the PDF.
okay. Um, that's all right. I can switch the screen back to you. So if I remember right, the top
Okay, let
level
me.
concept was in that finding of immune status,
Okay.
which there is also as Andrea, you were saying, there is also this immune status observable entity that we can fall back to. So does it does the fact that we have the observable entities negate the need for these altogether?
Mm, I don't think so because
Yeah.
they are assertions versus answers, right? If you remember those different patterns, right?
Right. So these values, which here's where I'm struggling with this. So if we have this observable Rebelia immune status determined by serology is our observable entity that we're interpreting, we're duplicating the fact that it's Rebelia in both sides of the equation, the question and the answer. To me, that's redundancy that doesn't need to be there.
But they but they may become disconnected
Right. So what happens typically from like workflow, and I know this is kind of different from
in
like the
an EHR.
terminology
Yeah.
piece, is, the lab will say, okay, they'll do the test for rubella and, however they're doing it, methodology. We'll just throw that out for a minute. And then it'll be positive, negative, detected, not detected, whatever they're using from the qualifier hierarchy. It's the clinician, like Ricky said, that makes this assertion that the patient is immune or not, and they put the problem on the problem list. So those are two separate systems. Often they're not connected. So the laboratory doesn't usually use the findings hierarchy. They don't have functionality in the LIS for that, for one thing, um, in most cases. So they would receive the diagnosis for the order because it's to have the medical legal justification. Usually globally, it's required.
Hmm.
Whatever terminology you're using, your code system, ICD, SNOMED. Um, and then the diagnosis, the laboratory isn't making the diagnosis or issuing any findings. It's the clinician, as Ricky said. They're the one that, because they're the ones that are medically legally allowed to do diagnosing.
Right. And they may put this in the problem list or they may use it as a reason to not do a vaccination because the patient is already immune.
Hmm.
Right.
Correct.
So it may become disconnected from the lab result
Okay,
in
so
that
you're
EHR. And so having the organism in there makes sense to me.
okay,
Right.
especially if it's being used as a reason for not vaccinating. Okay.
Hmm.
And that's in our clinical quality measures nationally for rubella, right? Since meaningful use. That's one of
Yeah.
the ones I believe. There's a couple of these diseases. So you wouldn't do the you could do an antibody test or if you know the patient has had a previous serology, that might be enough that they have enough antibodies that you don't want to give again cause patient harm because it would be contraindicated to try to vaccinate them.
Okay, so our general feedback on this is yes, we need them. However, the preferred, oops, excuse me, let me bring that over here. The preferred PT and FSN is immunity 2X, correct?
Well, I think immune would probably also work, but the question is, are they considering the serology piece in the current FSN to be the methodology, That's what it sounds like, right? And so antibody measurement says, yeah, I'm looking for antibodies, but that's more the component from a loin, if you're thinking in loin, right? Versus the method piece, which is just measurement, which will lose what the method actually was that was used, right?
Okay, give me 1 second. Let's just
Yeah,
dig into this a little bit further.
yeah.
Let's see if they've actually modeled that differently. No, so excuse me, even though the method is theoretically set in the FSN, it hasn't been defined as part of the logical model yet in either the Link
Hmm.
SNOMED or in SNOMED.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's technically the method. Um, let's see if it was.
I mean, I'm kind of trying to think what other method can you use for immune. I guess you wouldn't do a actual infection test with people.
So the other thing for immunity would be titers, right? Which is more quantitative or semi-quant. That's
Yeah,
another
yeah, but
method.
it's still using serologic methodology, right?
I put
To
in some
determine the
CDC.
titers,
I put in
right?
some CDC resources too that might help.
Yeah, let me click on those so I can have them later.
They talk about avidity testing too.
But they're still also just talking about measurement of the specific antibodies.
I do know I've heard people say that they can't get the methods they want, so we can't use a link in certain situations because the methods make a difference.
Hmm. So
Hmm.
they're more specifically then talking about EIAs or capture. Yeah. And immunity cannot be assessed by PCR. So,
See, I'm beginning to wonder, is serology in this case seems to be more of a department or group that's doing the test as opposed to an actual method.
yeah. Well,
It's kind of both. I mean, these tests are kind of sometimes in a serology area, sometimes they're not, depending how large the laboratory is.
Okay.
But they are specific. And I mean, I was gonna say the example, other than rubella, that's really common for all kinds of different methods that make a difference is VDRL testing too.
yeah, they're keeping the syphilis separate. They're not dealing with the syphilis aspect. That's a
Right, no,
separate
no, I know.
ticket.
That's why I didn't want
Right.
to
Yeah, that's a
commingle.
separate.
Yeah.
Right, but don't the specific ELISA, CLIA, and all that stuff, the agglutination test, don't those all follow up to serology or
Yeah.
not necessarily?
I think an I mean anything I think that uses antibodies against something to then
Hmm.
make them visible falls into that category, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
just grab the definition just in case you need it, John, in the chat.
Thanks.
Oh,
Let me see where I have the chat. If I can find. Wow,
also there
this
they're
is
just
all over
saying
the place.
antibodies. So you wouldn't call it serology if you're looking for antigen?
I usually see antigen and antibody because depending on what you're testing, but yeah, for this particular definition, it was just one.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, then measurement of antibodies as the replacement is okay. But
Oh, right.
Another one also classifies titers quantitative and qualitative because they have titers as semi-quant, all is serology too.
yeah. Yeah, I would shove the titers under serology too.
Okay, so is there anything else specific about number one that we want to take back to SNOMED International for consideration?
Yeah, that we're not entirely sure.
That we're not entirely sure. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, serology isn't defined, right, in SNOMED is what they mean by serology. That's what we looked at.
Right.
But
There,
yeah,
that's the whole thing that's driving this is serology and serologic tests are ambiguous terms. So they should be removed
they
from the
are they're a
FSM.
grouper term
Hmm.
for okay. Well, let's do some more Googling here. So under serological tests, it's the an enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assays, neutralization tests, and hemagglutinin inhibition tests, which are used to detect antibodies or antigen in a patient sample. So it's a method. Let's see, here's the definition for serological test. I put that in the chat from the Britannica, and looks like Andrea has a couple other ones. I'm going to click on those so we can get to them. Okay, Cleveland Clinic says that. Okay, Medline also limits it to antibody, but Britannica says it's
Here's something. So the last one was from the National Cancer Institute. It says presence of antibodies or other substances in a blood sample. So even the U.S. federal entities are not in agreement.
yeah. I think it comes from testing, it's tests done on serum, really is where it comes from, like from a um, language perspective, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I
But
mean,
I don't think anybody would ever consider a PCR done on a serum a serological test.
right.
So,
And that was in the first link from CDC that some of the testing is done by PCR for rubella. Um, I think it's rare because just because the costs and stuff, usually serology's most commonly done, it's more accessible, etc. Most people have it on their menus. They may not have the PCR tests on their menus.
but they wouldn't consider a PCR test a serology test, I don't think.
No, 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 I wouldn't.
So the Britannica says there are different types of serological tests: flocculation test, neutralization test, inhibition te inhibition tests, and enzyme-linked immunoabsorbent assay tests, and chemiluminescence immunoassays. So all of those fall under serological testing, and then they can be against antibodies or antibody-like substances, I guess, is what they're saying.
So those sound like those are more in alignment with the actual Loink method.
Yeah. Agreed.
I'm gonna put one in the chat from an organization you may have heard of.
Oh, now that's playing dirty.
No, I just came across it because they list serology testing techniques as EIA, DFA for fluorescent antibodies, Western blots.
Mm.
And they do say test device containing a specific antigen, and then you look for the antibody response from the patient. It's a nice overview. That's why I put it in there. So thank you, APHL. And they reference the Medline Plus too, so
Oh, say, okay. So getting back to forming our response.
Yeah. Keep us focused.
Um, all I have is the we prefer immunity to organism X as the preferred term and or FSN. We like the determined by antibody measurement suffix for the term. Are we still in agreement on those two statements?
Yeah, but we don't know that if it's enough.
But we don't know if it's enough.
I mean, I don't know what other way to describe the grab bag of serological test, right? And maybe we don't even need the antibody measurement because immunity can only be determined by antibody measurement. So, um, maybe that's redundant. But I don't know.
I
Are
think they all.
there, are there, can you go back to your hierarchy and like for the hepatitis A virus, can we just see if there are any other immune ones or rubella? It is fine.
Oh, of course, after I clicked on it. All
It's
right, which
okay.
one of these do you
Hepatitis.
want to?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter.
All right, let's go back to our Rebellia.
Rubella status.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that parentage, but that's just me.
But this is the observable entity piece,
Correct.
right?
You are right. Let me switch back over. Where is my... Nope, that's also... Hey, how about that? Let's go back to findings. Immunity to measles, immunity to...
So it looks like for polio, at least, there is a status that says poliovirus immune, and then there is a how was that immunity determined? So it is looking for the method piece, I think.
Yeah, and that's
Just in
pretty
looking,
much...
what else is there?
These are all under finding of immune status.
Right.
Some of them are specify the by serology, some of them do not.
But some of them that are not, okay, finding of immune status.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is do some searches on does a clinician need to know if a test is serology for immune status. So I think
Measles,
that's what we're trying to figure out, right? Do they have
right?
to
Can you,
document that it's
yeah.
by serology? If they don't, then you can use the more generic finding. But if there's kind of a need
I mean, it looks
clinically,
like for some diseases, it looks like there is just the immune as a finding, and then for others, there is immune, and
Well,
then by one with this child, with a child of biserology.
yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't look like there's any other bi whatever. Oh, there's one in immunocompromised patient, but that's different.
I didn't say the hierarchy was clean.
No.
so CMS says that yes, physicians must document if a test is a serology for immunity. It ensures accurate insurance reimbursement and verifies the test is medically necessary.
Well, but that's the test. That's not the problem list finding thing.
Andrew, is there a link to that document where
Yeah,
you
yeah,
pulled
I'm
that
gonna,
from?
and again, I'm doing
I
the Google searches, so I
no,
mean, I don't know if it's
it's
using
okay.
AI.
I can't copy and paste the text
I
out of the
know.
chat.
Oh,
I I can share the chat since I'm recording this meeting afterwards, and then you can copy it from the minutes
Okay,
from
that's
the
fine.
Confluence page. I
Okay,
just, yeah,
it's all right. I totally get it.
I have no control over the setting in
Yep.
this particular case.
it's just like we still haven't figured out the recording on some of the shield calls for the setting, right?
Hmm.
Christina and Ricky can do it, but we haven't.
Well, it depends if you're logged in with the right, yeah.
Well, even that we've been able. Christina's been able unable to do so. So there's some
Huh,
issue.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff here I disagree with.
But it looks like the serology piece is intended to be the method. But I honestly don't know. I mean, from a antibody perspective, I mean, how else, besides testing for antibodies, how else would you identify the immune status? I mean, in animals, you could do an infection test, but but you
Well,
don't do that in humans.
can the
Let's
antibody
give you some
be,
rabies to see if you're immune.
and I'm assuming that the antibody can be present but below a certain threshold as to impart immunity.
That's probably true, yes.
Okay, so that explains the antibody present, but not the immunity.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's definitely
Okay,
present. I see that in results.
okay.
so this consultant link, and I take it as is because I don't know like how trustworthy or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Their use case is for like universities, employers trying to verify immunity of employees versus requiring them to have a vaccination for a said disease. And so a lot of the requirements, even though you may not need serology to verify immunity, because the patient can say they're immune or had disease, um, kind of the definitive way to do that is via serology. So in some cases, there's kind of requirements that the clinician has to say they have immunity via serology.
You do lose immunity over time. So even if you were vaccinated, you might not be. And if your immune system is compromised, even if you had the disease, you might not have created
Hmm.
enough antibodies to still be immune.
Or a bone marrow transplant or something like that.
Hmm. So, okay, I'm gonna have to go, y'all.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess we can pick this up um next week or the week
Yeah, and
after
I'll
or
think about it a little bit more.
okay.
But I don't
Um,
know if there's anybody on the SNOMED side that, you know, knows whether this serology is more the method or more the what they were looking for, right?
I can post to the forum and ask the question from our team to
Hmm.
see if I can get any clarification if the original intent was to represent the method,
Hmm.
or a categorization or classification of the method, as part of what the original intent was. And my guess is the answer is probably going to be we don't know. Um, hence
Yeah,
the
I don't
ambiguity.
know if it's I mean serology as a method is also a grouping, right? So I think the question is more, was the intent here to say that we determined the immunity based on antibody measurement, right? So that it's against antibodies, or do we care that it was a specific type of method that we
Yeah.
did the antibody measurement with, right? Which
Okay.
one of these is it?
And it looks like a lot of state laws and universities and others are requiring to know that it's only acceptable by a certain method. So if you're trying to get the clinical documentation of it, then the clinician making that assessment, especially if it's like the student's home primary care provider, may need to indicate that it's by serology for it to be usable in that context. So they might need that detail. I put some additional links in for later if folks want to, and there's some other like papers and references. So that might be those
Yep.
might have the answers that you're looking for.
Okay. I'll take a look through these and I may post to the forum, but I'll at least wait until we go through next week's meeting. So if there's additional thoughts between now and next Thursday, I'll hold until then. Oh, actually, I'm not going to be on the call next Thursday. I'm out of
Uh-oh.
office. So can we hold this until the 9th?
Sure, we can hold this until the 9th, but then you won't be on the discussion with Hanit. Is that okay?
Um, if Hannah can make it next week and we have it, I think I can dial in because I'll still be driving. But I have a family event that day.
Okay.
So
All right. I hate for you to have to, to have to do that on your day off. I
yeah,
mean, should we just
sorry, it happens. So like I said, as long as I'm just driving in the car, I can listen in on the call. I don't have much feedback. I just want to listen to the discussion from a learning perspective to see
okay.
what
All right.
guidance
I
is
mean,
given to her.
we'll record it again too, so.
Yep. Okay. All right. Sounds good, everybody.
Okay,
Thank
so
you very
will this one
much.
will pick back up on the 9th, let them know we're still working on it. So,
Okay. And I'll post any question. I'll review those links and then post whatever questions I come up with to the forum, and hopefully I'll have some answers.
okay, awesome. All right, and with that, we're 1 minute over. So thanks, everybody. And I'll talk to you guys, some of you on the 2nd and some of you on the 9th.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.